your consent. Appreciate it. Cool. So I'm going to start recording, and I'm also going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. So if someone can give me a thumbs up when they can see the presentation, I would appreciate it. Cool. Thank you. All right, so as I said, I work for a group, Common Energy, and what we do is low-cost, clean energy. But I'm also going to tell you a bit about alternative energies as well today. So just a little bit about me and who I am, since you don't really know me. I am a student at Bard College. I study art history and studio arts, and I run the environmental club there. I worked for the sustainability office for a year and a half. At Bard, I study Sanskrit and Arabic. I'm super into languages. And I drive an electric car. I love it. It's the BMW i3. I'm actually connected to community solar, so my car is charged on solar energy, which is like super clean, super green, super cool. I'm super passionate about environmentalism because I grew up as a scout. I was a Boy Scout and a Girl Scout and president of my venture crew. So I have a cumulative 13 years of time outdoors as a scout. And also because I live in the Hudson Valley right now, and I feel like I can see the negative effects of climate change almost every day, whether it be smog in the summer or the lack of snow in the winter. Like, it's obvious that things are different now than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. And also because I know that we can do so much better than what we are doing. And lastly, this work, the work I do with Common Energy, helps to plant trees. Since every time we sign someone up for community solar, we donate $20 to one tree planted, which plants a tree for every dollar. So that's 20 trees planted every time someone gets clean energy. Super awesome. And then I have some photos. My favorite animal is a brown bear, and I love weeping cherry trees. So that's a little bit about me. Again, my name is Karianne. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk kind of fast because there's a lot of info to get through as far as alternative energies go, and lots of different energy sources to talk about, which is cool. So only 18% of the energy generated in the US in 2018 came from renewable sources. What does it mean to be a renewable resource? Well, in order for something to be renewable, it means that we have to be able to consistently get that resource and not have a finite amount. So the sun is pretty much the most renewable resource there is. We can't run out of the sun, believe it or not. But things like, you know, oil, which we get out of the ground, there's only a finite amount of oil in the ground. Other things, technically water is a finite resource. There's only X amount of water on the planet. Be hard to run out of all of the water, including the salinated, but running out of fresh water would be easy because there's not that much of it. So a renewable resource is something that we would constantly have access to and that we wouldn't consider a finite, as in at some point there's not anymore. So the first one I'm going to talk about is energy from oil. So in 2019, the US consumed an average of 20.5 million barrels of petroleum per day. Oil is refined into gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, heating oil, etc. This is the type of stuff that we put into cars and into the heater in your house, probably. And the way it works is it's a combustion mechanism. So all of the energies I'm going to talk about pretty much talk about turning some type of wheel. We're turning a manufacturing a wheel spins, and that turns into electrical energy. So in this case, there's a combustion chamber, and the chamber is where the oil is lit on fire. And as the pressure builds and the heat escapes, it turns this turbine, which then is turned into electricity via the generator and transformer. So in this case, burning oil, spin a wheel, energy. This is not considered a renewable resource, seeing as there's a finite amount of oil and we have to continually, suck it out of the ground in order to get what we do have to make this. Natural gas works in a very similar way. It's found by drilling into the Earth's surface. In 2019, the US consumed 31.0 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. It's a lot of natural gas. About 36% of all natural gas is used in the US for generating electricity. In this example, very similar. You have the gas turbine on the bottom, which is likely a combustion, producing a bunch of heat and pressure. In this case, it's heating up this water, which is spinning through a pump. And as it goes through that, it spins a wheel. The wheel can be turned into electrical energy. So again, we're burning something, producing heat, and spinning a wheel with that heat produced. Natural gas and oil are again not renewable, produce a lot of produce a lot of greenhouse gases, which we'll talk more as we go. And yeah, cool. So nuclear energy, which is one of the more controversial energy sources out there, it's responsible for 20% of energy production in the US each year, and other countries also rely heavily on nuclear energy. It works by breaking a bond in uranium atoms through nuclear fission, and this process produces, you guessed it, heat. And that heat is turned into mechanical energy, and that mechanical energy spins a turbine, and the turbine turns into electrical energy. So, over on this image on the right, we have the reactor vessel where that nuclear fission is happening, creating heat. In this case, the heat is being pumped through a water tank, and the water tank heats up the water, produces steam. Steam turns a turbine. As the steam cools down, it can be recycled and reused. The reason nuclear is so controversial is the question of whether or not it is renewable. Since it's breaking a uranium atom, it'd be kind of hard to run out of enough uranium to like not to have it be a finite resource. However, the waste, the like leftovers of nuclear power are super dangerous, as you might have heard. And when you are done with a nuclear power plant, you often have to bury it in concrete, like really deep in the ground to ensure that it's not going to leak out and, cause community or ecosystem disruption outside, just like leaking uranium. That would be uncool. Also, because the water is recycled, it can be used multiple times, but often the water will be like let out into a water source nearby once it's kind of used a lot. And that hot water that has now been treated like via the heat from the uranium from the nuclear fission can have a serious effect on the local ecosystems. For instance, the Indian Point power plant right here in the Hudson Valley, which is on the Hudson River, they just shut it down because the hot water was causing all of these fish to die, having a huge impact on the fishing community, and was evidently disrupting the ecosystems in our local environment. So technically renewable, but super controversial, but also we use it already very often to get energy. Hydropower is also kind of using water and spinning a wheel. So it captures kinetic energy of moving water from a high ground to a low ground. So whether it be a reservoir or just a river running down the side of a mountain, we're essentially just putting a turbine onto onto the river, and that wheel is spinning as the water passes through and goes downstream, and we can turn that into energy. In 2011, a year with above average rainfall, 7.9% of all energy used in the US came from hydropower. In New York, we use hydro all over the place. It's at the big waterfall, what is that called? Niagara Falls has a huge hydropower plant in the state. And then also up and down the Hudson River against the tributaries. It's all over the place. A surprising amount of New York energy comes from hydro. Um, the not great part of hydro is that it can disrupt migration patterns for certain amphibians and fishes. And so often when you do install a hydropower or a hydroelectric dam, damming in general is a kind of controversial thing to do to an ecosystem, depending on the situation. You have to build either ladders for eels or different fish ladders, and basically like create some way for the environment to continue their natural migration patterns throughout the, whatever infrastructure you're putting onto a river to make hydro work. Geothermal So geothermal can be used both to create electricity, but also just as a heat source. So as an alternative to heating oil. It's generated by drilling over a mile into the Earth's crust to find what's called a rickhat, which would be over 300 degrees Fahrenheit, super hot. You pump water down into that hole, and using the steam from hot water, you use that to turn a turbine, which creates electricity, as we've said multiple times. In 2018, geothermal energy accounted for 0.4% of the world's energy. So not that much energy. Essentially, every like geothermal place would need to drill a hole. So that's kind of a lot of work to do for not that much energy, it seems. However, on my campus at Bard, I know there are like 4 dorms that all have geothermal hot water. And so, like, just the water in the showers and in the sinks is coming from geothermal heating. So we're not using it for electricity, we're just using it to heat up our water, but that saves us some electricity down the line. Okay, cool. Oh, there we go. Okay, wind power. So it's responsible for 5% of global energy in 2018, and it's the second most common renewable energy after hydropower. And it's basically a big turbine is spun by wind, which generates electricity. We've discussed it before. All you got to do is spin something, and you can get electricity out of it. In this case, the wind is spinning these giant pieces. I like to tell the story. My family owns like 250 acres out in Kansas. And when we went to visit, they have a wind farm on our land. And it's really cool. You can see these giant, like, turbines, like the bottom of it is the size of your car, a car and a half almost. They're so big. Um, yeah, and they're just like really big, produce a bunch of energy, but they aren't great for every situation. If there are a bunch of hills or a bunch of trees or not as much wind, then you're not going to work well with wind power. However, it is renewable because you're not going to run out of wind either. Okay, cool. I saw something maybe pop up in the chat, but I'm not able to open the chat for some reason. Okay, I'll have to come back to that. I'm sorry. Okay, and lastly, the last alternative energy I'm going to talk about is solar energy, which I'm obviously going to go into more depth on in the second half of this presentation. So solar is considered the fastest growing renewable energy in the market right now. It produced only 2% of the world's energy in 2018, but 2019 and 2020 we're expecting much higher numbers than that. Not much higher, but probably closer to 5%. And there are 2 ways to produce energy from the sun. The first is photovoltaic panels, which most people are familiar with. That's what this graphic on the right is. Essentially, you have a plane of silicon with a bunch of wires running across it. And when the sun hits the silicon, it heats up. Electrons on it move back and forth, and the transfer of electrons is caught on the wires, which can be transferred into electrical energy. Definitely not as simple as turning a wheel, but totally as effective. And then the second mechanism is using mirrors to heat up water, which turns a wheel, which we're more familiar with at this point. So yeah, the pros cons of solar energy is not everyone can put solar on their home. That's just like you don't have a roof for it. There's too many trees around you. The sun doesn't hit your house enough. Lots of reasons why. And also solar panels, solar farms will produce different amounts of energy at different times of the year. So during the summer, it's really bright out, there's less clouds, you get more energy. And during the winter, it's, not as bright out and more clouds, you get less energy. But otherwise, solar is like becoming recyclable. We can recycle panels, we can recycle infrastructure. And they have a 20-year lifespan on most solar panels at this point, which is pretty good. And they're also way more efficient than they were 10 years ago, which is also pretty cool. So then the last slide of this section is kind of a summary and a comparison of the carbon footprint of each of these energy sources. So in this example, nuclear power is not being counted as a renewable resource. Again, super controversial. But in the middle section, we can see the amount of energy produced in 2019. I believe this is global, I want to say, but it might be US. And then the part on the right is the carbon footprint per kilowatt hour. So kilowatt hour is just like, we can think of it as a single unit. If you're not familiar, it's the amount of energy used in an hour or like transferred in an hour. It's, yeah, unimportant. It's the same unit. And we're talking about gram, grams of CO2 for each kilowatt hour. Okay, cool. I think someone else just joined us. Thanks for joining. We are now just talking about alternative energies and doing a quick comparison between the CO2 output of all of these energies. So if we look at it, oil and gas and coal burning were, the most used energy sources in 2019, but they also produce a lot of grams of CO2 for each of the kilowatt hours they would produce. Whereas things like wind power and solar, way less used for energy production, but also way less CO2 emitted per kilowatt hour. And this per kilowatt hour is also looking at the infrastructure costs. So hydro, although it just uses water, it, sorry. Oh, it has a lot of cement in it, and cement produces a bunch of CO2. And so you produce way more CO2 per kilowatt hour with hydro than you do with any of these other sources. So, awesome. That's alternative energies. Does anyone have any questions about those before we start talking about community solar in upstate New York? If you're muted, you can unmute. If you want to just use the chat, that's great too. Okay, I'm gonna keep going then. I don't want to waste y'all's time. So, oh my gosh, this is Massachusetts. That's embarrassing. I'm talking about New York today, but we also service Massachusetts. So, New York has a community solar program that enables you to lower your emissions and save money. It's called the New York Sun Program. It's a solar initiative, and essentially anyone in the area can get access to clean energy produced by solar panels on community solar farms and get credits towards their electricity bill for free. This is a state-supported program. It is free for people to sign up for, and it's helping us green the grid. So the company I work for, Common Energy, is an official community solar programs provider, and we support clean energy and offer guaranteed savings via said state program. We're registered with community solar provider in New York State. Again, sorry about that. And we have an A+ with the Better Business Bureau, and we're currently serving thousands of customers across New York, Maryland, Illinois, Maine, Minnesota, and Massachusetts. And we contribute, as I said at the beginning, a portion of all of our profits to local nonprofits. So every person signed up is $20 to one tree planted. So that's our company. We work in community solar. We are state supported, and you can find us listed on the New York Sun Initiative website, which I can send the link to at the end of the presentation. So how does community solar work? Well, it starts off with a solar farm, and that solar farm converts energy from the sun into clean electricity. Then we partner that community solar farm with the utility and replace fossil fuels one-to-one. So every solar panel turned on is X amount of energy turned off at the fossil fuel burning site, which means every time we sign someone up and turn more of the solar farm on, we're literally stopping fossil fuels from going onto the grid, which is so important. Once the electricity gets to the utility, it's distributed through the broader electrical grid. In New York, we partner with Central Hudson and National Grid. And as I said, we're on NYSEG's website. So those are the grids that we're putting clean energy on. And then anyone who signs up with their utility can receive savings on their every month on their electricity bill via those clean energy credits that we looked at on the state page. So in order to get access to this, you sign up with Common Energy for free today online, and then we connect your utility account to a local solar farm. You receive clean energy credits on your bill, which lowers your energy costs and saves you money, and you lower your emissions and save money every month. It's about a 90% reduced emissions in your community every time that someone signs up. And so the more people that sign up for community solar farms built in their local area, the more of that energy is going on to the local grid, which means the more of the grid is green. So then instead of paying your utility, you pay Common Energy a lower amount every month once you're signed up for the community solar farm. I like to read this kind of like a diner receipt. You can see the national grid electricity charges and their delivery charges. And then you can see the clean energy credit received on your bill. So in this case, $132 of the energy used in this person's month came from the solar farm. And it's only going to cost them 118, which means they're saving $13. So this is the 10% discount coming off of the energy credit. 10% of whatever the solar farm produces on your energy bill. And then that's what you pay for. You save, $5, $10, depending on how much the solar farm produces. And you get a lower total guaranteed every month. And Common Energy is super focused on like the impact we're having. So we like to tell people, how much CO2 they're preventing. In this case, the person prevented about 1,200 pounds, which is the equivalent of planting 16 trees. The only things people need to sign up are their utility login and their method of payment. It becomes automated payment, which most people have on their, utility these days anyways. And the reason you pay Common Energy instead of your utility going forward is because now part of your bill goes towards the solar farm and the other part goes to the utility to maintain the wires and do delivery as it normally would. So your utility supplier maintains the same, and we just make sure that the solar farm gets paid for the energy they're sending you. Because if you kept paying your utility, the solar farm just wouldn't get the money it needs that you're getting energy from it, and that doesn't make sense. Cool. So this is actually the project I'm signed up for in Socrates. I've been on it for the last 5 or 6 months or so, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty cool. As I said, I charge my electric car on the house, so I'm powered by the sun when I drive. This project is 2.9 megawatts. Most of our projects are 3 to 5 megawatts, and it's serving, I think, like 300 homes or something like that. And we have one in Unionvale, in Chatham, and East Fishkill. And those are just the Hudson Valley ones. I'm in Red Hook, so that's what comes to mind. And when you sign up for community solar, you make a positive impact on your community, save money each month. Sign up is free, and you can also cancel at any time for free. And you prevent 100,000 pounds of carbon emissions, equivalent to planting 200 trees. Okay, I've given so much information. I've said so many things. Can you still rent if you have an apartment? Yes, you absolutely can. You can own or lease or rent and sign up. Anyone with a utility account is able to sign up. Are there any other questions about anything that I've talked about today that I can answer for y'all? I also just put into the chat the NYSERDA state program link, the Better Business Bureaus, and my link as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the alternative energies also, if people have questions about that. Okay, cool. We had someone come in and they're gone now.